It took exactly 18 months. 18 months from the day Donald Trump promised to release everything about Jeffrey Epstein to the moment his Justice Department dumped thousands of pages of heavily redacted documents and one photograph that revealed everything about why Trump fought so hard to keep them secret. December 19th, 2025, 3:47 p.m. Eastern Time. Deep inside the Justice Department, career prosecutors clicked publish on what was supposed to be the most transparent document release in FBI history. Within seconds, reporters worldwide began downloading files that had been the subject of a year-long political war. But as the first PDFs opened, revealing page after page of thick black redaction bars, it became clear that something had gone terribly wrong, or perhaps for those in power, terribly right. The fight began in Palm Beach, Florida, where Jeffrey Epstein cultivated relationships with the world's most powerful men, among them a brash real estate developer who would become president. Trump and Epstein's friendship stretched back to the late 1980s, cemented in the exclusive clubs of Manhattan and Palm Beach. They were photographed together at parties throughout the 1990s, their wives socializing, their circles overlapping. In a 2002 New York Magazine profile, Trump praised Epstein as a terrific guy who likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. That quote would haunt Trump for decades. What seemed like rich men's bragging in 2002 became evidence of something darker after Epstein's 2019 arrest on federal sex trafficking charges. During a June 2024 Fox and Friends appearance, candidate Trump was asked directly, "Would you declassify the Epstein files?" "I guess I would," Trump responded confidently. "I think I would." The clip went viral instantly. Trump's campaign account shared it repeatedly. For months, it became a centerpiece of his transparency promises, a brilliant political move that transformed his greatest vulnerability into an asset. But something changed between campaign promises and governing reality. By July 2025, Trump's tone shifted dramatically. He called the Epstein files pretty boring stuff and dismissed demands for their release as a Democratic hoax. Attorney General Pam Bondi, who had promised full disclosure during confirmation hearings, went quiet. FBI Director Kash Patel began citing complex legal constraints and grand jury secrecy rules. Inside Trump's inner circle, panic was spreading. The problem wasn't criminal evidence against Trump. FBI investigations across 3 administrations, Obama's, Biden's, and Trump's own, had concluded there wasn't sufficient evidence to charge him with crimes related to Epstein's trafficking. The victims who cooperated with investigators hadn't implicated Trump in abuse. The problem was what the files revealed about their relationship. Years of friendship, private parties, and photographs that would demolish Trump's narrative that he barely knew Epstein and had heroically banned him from Mar-a-Lago upon discovering his behavior. In February 2025, Bondi orchestrated a masterpiece of political theater. She held a White House event releasing Phase 1 to carefully selected conservative influencers. Surrounded by MAGA media personalities, she unveiled thick binders with great fanfare, promising unprecedented transparency. It was a con. Reporters who reviewed the materials discovered nearly everything had already been public through previous court proceedings. The supposedly groundbreaking release contained almost nothing new. By summer, pressure mounted to unsustainable levels. Republican Congressman Thomas Massie and Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna formed an unlikely alliance. Their bipartisan Epstein Files Transparency Act required the DOJ to release all unclassified records within 30 days. Trump and House Speaker Mike Johnson tried desperately to kill the bill through backroom pressure, but Massie and Khanna deployed a discharge petition forcing a vote. The bill passed with a thunderous landslide, 418-4 in the House, unanimous in the Senate. Trump signed it on November 19th, starting a 30-day countdown to December 19th. But signing didn't mean complying with its spirit. What happened over those 30 days exposed the cover-up machinery in full operation. Career prosecutors who had worked Epstein cases for years were suddenly reassigned. Documents prepared for release were abruptly pulled back for additional review by political appointees. Legal teams worked around the clock finding justifications for sweeping redactions. Meanwhile, House Democrats had obtained tens of thousands of documents directly from Epstein's estate through aggressive subpoenas. Throughout December, they released materials on a rolling basis, each drop more explosive than the last. On December 12th, Democrats released photographs showing Epstein with Trump at Mar-a-Lago social events, with Bill Clinton on private planes. One photo went viral immediately. A woman with Lolita, the title of Nabokov's novel about a man's obsession with a young girl, written across her body. On December 18th, just one day before the DOJ's legal deadline, Democrats released another 68 photographs from inside Epstein's properties, reinforcing the industrial scale of his trafficking operation. Then came December 19th. At 3:47 p.m., the Justice Department's official release went live. Reporters began frantically downloading thousands of files. Initial excitement lasted approximately 90 seconds, the time it took to realize they were almost entirely blacked out. Page after page of solid black redaction bars. Entire 119-page documents with not a single visible word. Witness lists completely censored. Interview summaries reduced to blank pages. One file labeled Masseuse List was entirely redacted from top to bottom, but buried in the thousands of pages was one image of absolute political dynamite. The photograph showed Jeff smiling broadly, holding a giant novelty check bearing Donald Trump's distinctive signature. Handwritten on the check's memo line were words suggesting Trump had paid Epstein $22,500 for something or someone. The photo was professionally framed with "once in a blue moon" repeated decoratively around the border. It was the same check referenced in Epstein's 50th birthday book, which included a Mar-a-Lago member's message joking about selling a fully depreciated woman to Trump for that exact amount. The implications were devastating. This wasn't necessarily evidence of a literal crime. The birthday book's joking tone suggested performative humor among wealthy men, but it revealed a level of comfort with transactional relationships involving women. A casual dehumanization presented as entertainment that completely undermined Trump's repeated claims of having been disgusted by Epstein's behavior toward young women. Within hours, the photograph had been shared millions of times across every platform. Cable news displayed it on continuous loop. Political analysts debated its impact on Trump's legacy. The political damage was done and irreversible. Trump's response was immediate and furious. At 6:23 p.m., the so-called Epstein files are a complete hoax. That check is totally fake. These were made up by the FBI under Comey. I barely knew Epstein and kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago. The problem was, this contradicted thoroughly documented reality. The birthday book came from Maxwell's seized possessions, not FBI files. The check photograph was in Epstein's estate materials, and Trump's barely knowing claim conflicted with dozens of verified photographs spanning 2 decades and his own 2002 magazine statement. Congressman Massie and Congressman Khanna held a hastily arranged joint press conference at 8 p.m. Standing shoulder to shoulder, conservative Republican and progressive Democrat united in fury, they delivered a damning assessment. "This release does not comply with our legislation," Khanna declared, voice heavy with barely controlled frustration. "We required all unclassified materials. What we got were thousands of pages completely blacked out. That's not transparency. That's obstruction of Congress." Massie, one of Trump's fiercest supporters on many issues, visibly struggled to contain his anger. "The administration fought this release for months. They only agreed when we forced their hand. Now they're giving us documents that look like they were run through an industrial shredder. This is completely unacceptable, and we're exploring all legal options to force actual compliance." Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer issued a scathing statement calling the release a massive mountain of blacked-out pages that violates both the spirit of transparency and the letter of the law. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, a former Trump defense attorney, rewarded with his position for loyal service, held a brief press conference attempting damage control. "The Trump administration is providing levels of transparency that prior administrations never contemplated," Blanche claimed unconvincingly. "Reporters weren't buying it. Why is a 119-page document completely blacked out with 0 visible words?" one shouted. Blanche's response was pure bureaucratic doublespeak. Each redaction was carefully reviewed by career prosecutors applying established legal standards. But whistleblowers inside justice were already telling a different story. Anonymous sources told the Washington Post that political appointees had systematically overruled career prosecutors' recommendations. Materials FBI agents had prepared for public disclosure were suddenly pulled back after White House counsel review. By midnight, constitutional law experts were analyzing whether Congress could sue the Justice Department to force fuller disclosure. The Epstein Files Transparency Act had been explicit in its requirements. If justice was using overly broad interpretations of narrow exemptions, federal courts might compel significantly more transparency. But the real damage extended beyond legal technicalities. The damage was to public trust in institutions. For 18 months, Americans had been promised full disclosure. Trump had campaigned on radical transparency. Bipartisan legislation had passed with overwhelming support. And when the deadline arrived, the public received thousands of pages of impenetrable black bars and one devastating photograph that raised infinitely more questions than it answered. The photograph of Trump's check became the scandal's defining image, not because it proved criminality beyond reasonable doubt, but because it crystallized exactly why Trump had fought so desperately to prevent disclosure. The files didn't contain evidence that would send Trump to prison. They contained embarrassing evidence that would undermine his political narrative and remind millions of voters of relationships he'd spent years trying to distance himself from. The Epstein Files scandal revealed something far deeper than individual wrongdoing. It exposed how easily powerful people, regardless of party, could systematically manipulate legal processes to protect themselves. The Justice Department's release was technically legal. Every redaction could theoretically be justified under some interpretation. But legal compliance and genuine moral accountability are fundamentally different things. Trump had promised to drain the swamp. Instead, he demonstrated exactly how the swamp protects its own when threatened. As 2025 drew to a close, the Epstein files remained largely secret, locked behind redactions and legal maneuvering. The photograph of Trump's check circulated endlessly. Conspiracy theories flourished in the deliberate absence of verifiable facts. The answer was clear. Transparency is remarkably easy to promise during campaigns and impossibly hard to deliver when it threatens the powerful. The Epstein files would remain a permanent symbol of that cynical calculation. Thousands of pages officially released, almost nothing actually revealed, and one damning photograph that explained everything about why the whole truth stayed buried.